Rules for April 7th. First item is to convene and approve the minutes of March 31st. And while we're preparing to do that, the committee will please introduce itself.
So Representative Mark Higley, and I'm from Lowell and represent Lowell, J. Westfield, Troy, and town of Eden.
State Senator Joe Benning from the Caledonia District, soon to become the Essex District, but that's a long explanation. Sorry.
Representative Seth Baumgartz. I represent Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, part of Sunderland, and I serve on the Natural Resources Committee.
Representative Carol Odie, and I represent the north end of Burlington, and I serve on the House Ways and Means Committee.
Good morning, Senator Chris Bray from Bristol, representing Addison Senate District. I serve on Natural Resources and Energy and Finance.
Good morning, Trevor Squirrel, representing Underhill and Jericho, and I'm on the House Appropriations Committee.
And Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I help the committee.
My name is Mark McDonald. I'm chair of the committee from Orange County, and Charlene Dindo is in the room behind us, which we call the Captain Kirk room, and she keeps us flying in the right direction. First item on the agenda to review the minutes of March 31st. Do we have a motion? Senator Bray.
I move that approval of the minutes from the meeting of March 31st.
Senator Bray has moved that the minutes be approved. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and the minutes have been approved. First item on the working agenda is to review the draft memorandum, the Committee of Jurisdiction on Rule 2, the regulation of cannabis establishments. We've all heard the copy of the draft. I believe it's on our website, and it is also on the board at the end of the table, electronically presented. Representative Higley, this was you have worked hard on this, and would you like to start us off?
Sure. Again, I appreciate the wordsmithing on this, adding in, in the last paragraph, Colorado again. A lot of you had left before Senator Benning had asked Mr. Scheer as whether or not the Cannabis Control Board had heard or included in their testimony Colorado's changing of a labeling. The answer was no. So again, we had testimony earlier at a LCAR meeting where an individual had talked about that. A lot has happened in the past 10 years in regards to what Colorado has done. And so this is just a way to put it in front of the committees of jurisdiction again to consider what Colorado did, the reasons why, and hopefully make adjustments if needed.
Anybody have any questions for Representative Higley? And we're all clear on what the issue is. The warning is, some believe it's too wordy and it doesn't get people's attention on what some would believe were the major issues with the law. So, 10 years in Colorado?
Yeah.
My goodness, time flies.
Yeah.
What's the committee's pleasure?
I make a motion that we approve this letter to the committees of jurisdiction.
Okay. So Representative Higley moves that the letter be approved with the updates shown in yellow before us. And if there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay, and the letter shall be delivered. Thank you, Representative Higley.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Department of Taxes, Meals and Rooms Tax Regulations, 21P36. And Will Baker, Director of Legal Unit, Department of Taxes. Good morning, Mr. Baker. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Senator McDonald. Happy to be here on behalf of the Vermont Department of Taxes. Here today to discuss our amendments to our Meals and Rooms tax regulations. These were last amended in 2010. So it has been 12 years, and the updates and amendments that you see in this proposal are to account for statutory changes since various statutory changes since 2010. There's a few modernization amendments to the Meals and Rooms Tax statute over time, including booking agents, which are the online travel reservation and rooms tax, online travel reservation companies, and how the rooms tax interacts with online bookings. Similarly, there are some changes to account for the statutory changes for meal facilitators, which is the online meal delivery platforms, and how the meals tax base interacts with the charges that are charged by these online meal delivery platforms. All those changes that I just mentioned are very intuitive, and the amount the customer pays for the hotel stay or for the meal is taxable, just as if the customer walked into a Vermont restaurant. There are changes to various things such as vending machines. A few years ago, the law was amended to make all food sold by vending machines subject to meals tax. It was not before. So those changes were incorporated into these regulations. And we did remove some exemptions that are no longer in the law, exemptions for credit unions, medical service corporations, and hospital corporations. Now those medical, hospital, et cetera, meals served on at hospitals, those are still exempt, but the statutory language has been updated since our regulations. And so our regulations now match the certain categories that are in the statute. There are some other clarifications about how the rooms tax base or the meals tax base interacts with any discounts, coupons, and gift certificates offered by the Vermont restaurant or hotel. Otherwise there are no policy positions taken by the Department of Taxes in these new regulations. It's merely updating the regulations to conform with statutory changes made since 2010.
Any questions for the witness? Questions for Mr. Baker? I have one. Mr. Baker, healthcare facilities. If my aunt invites me to her independent living site and takes me to dinner at the restaurant there, will she pay a rooms and meals tax for herself and for me, her guest?
No, I don't believe so. Meals that are prepared and served by employees, volunteers, or contractors of nursing homes, residential care homes, assisted living residences, home for terminally ill, et cetera, those are exempt. So it's meals served on the premises of those places. So that would include guests.
A question was asked of me a couple of days ago. What would we have to put in the State House cafeteria in the way of defibrillators on the wall and other devices to render the State House cafeteria to qualify as a medical treatment area?
That's probably outside of my subject matter area here.
Fair enough. Okay. But there are some of us that would seek to have that question answered. Any other questions for the witness? Senator Bray.
Not a question, but hearing no other questions, I move approval of Rule 21P36.
Senator Bray has moved approval of the rule. Is there any discussion?
Just want to make sure there were no other witnesses pending on the question.
Are there any other witnesses pending on the question? Okay.
Thank
you. I think we're good, Senator Benning. Thank you for asking. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And the rules have been approved. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you very much.
22E02, the Office of Professional Regulation, Emergency Administration, Rules for Notaries, Public and Remote Notarization. Which is sort of a, is it not a nonsense. Anyway, it sort of seems like an internal conflict. For the Staff Attorney for the Professional Regulations, Secretary of State's Office, Lauren Lehman. Welcome.
Good morning. Hi, all. My name is Lauren Lehman. I'm a staff attorney for the Office of Professional Regulation. I'm back before you again today with these emergency administrative rules for notaries, public and remote notarization. You may recall we've been here every 6 months, I think, since March 2020. And hopefully this will be the last time that we come to you with this request. These still are in the form of emergency rules because they, this time, though there's less urgency, the rules do accommodate a form of notarization without having two people in the same space, in the same rule. There's still some concerns. People are still concerned about being in the same space with notaries public or anybody, a member of the public, to have those documents signed and executed appropriately. But I think in this situation, more importantly, we have legislation that's about to codify a lot of this process that is pending in this. It passed out of the House. It is now pending in the Senate. So we're hoping that we won't have to come back, that these rules will be adopted one more time, giving us the opportunity to implement a more permanent solution with the legislation that's currently pending. A quick reminder of the content of the rule. It allows for remotely located individuals, remotely located from the notary public, to have a notarial act performed. So it creates a process for somebody who cannot be in the same room with the notary public to appear over audio visual communication, provide their identification, execute the document, have a notary public witness that execution of the document, receive the document, sign it, and then have that document be formally accepted. So deeds, wills, adoption paperwork, really essential commercial transactions. And we initially adopted this in March 2020 to facilitate those transactions continuing through a period of time when folks could not be in the same room together. We've readopted it. Last time was September last fall, and as the Omicron wave, the Delta wave was going out and the Omicron wave was coming in. And again, we're here. This time would be the fourth renewal, the fifth time it would be adopted, and hopefully the final. There's also a movement on the federal level and nationally to move toward facilitating these remote notarial acts. And so the legislation would bring us up into compliance, or to kind of stay at the same level as the rest of the country and facilitate that interstate commerce. So we really think, we were on the cutting edge of adopting this process. We want to keep it going until we get it all established in law. And so that's where we are today. And I'm happy to answer any questions or.
Any questions for the witness? Would it be fair to say that the reason we are here today is because an almost identical emergency rule has expired and we are continuing the policy that's been in place since 2020?
Yes, it would absolutely be fair to say that the only correction I would make would say it's exactly the same. No changes have been made to the underlying rule or policy. So it's the same policy we adopted and previously.
What's the committee, Representative Bongartz?
I'll move adoption.
Representative Bongartz moves that the rule be approved, extending the existing policy for yet another semester. Is there any discussion?
I don't know who all the people are on the screen, so I'm assuming there are no other witnesses.
Do we have any other witnesses that are scheduled to testify on this emergency rule extension? Thank you, Senator Benning. Keep us double checking. The motion has been made that the rule be approved. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay, and the rule has been approved. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, 21P30, Office of Professional Regulation, Administrative Rules for Veterinarians.
Good morning.
Gabriel Gilman, General Counsel for Professional Regulations, Secretary of State's Office. Mr. Gilman, welcome.
Good morning, Senator McDonald and committee. Thank you very much for having me this morning. So pending before you is a strike and rewrite of the administrative rules for veterinarians. This replaces rules that were last adopted in 2012, that veterinary board. The material changes you'll see in this rule versus its predecessor are that this rule adopts a definition of the veterinarian client-patient relationship that's consistent with an intervening change in statute. It provides for inspection. It clarifies that the board does not require a laws and rules exam. The board feels strongly that it should minimize barriers to entry to Vermont from qualified practitioners elsewhere. It clarifies the consultation exemption found in statute, clarifies a livestock management exemption found in statute. It specifies continuing education requirements and takes a somewhat more hands-off approach versus its predecessor to what kind of continuing education one needs. The board felt that veterinarians have a strong incentive to take relevant continuing education, and that specifying subtypes wasn't necessarily helpful to the effort. So they have a more liberal continuing education rule that somewhat lowers costs of compliance. The new rule imposes duties to report certain sentinel events, such as an adverse malpractice finding. It incorporates statutory disease reporting requirements found in Titles 6 and 13 that are, relatively obscure to the average veterinarian and probably would not be within the veterinarian's awareness unless they were condensed in the rule. It sets separate requirements for companion and non-companion animals. The nature of veterinary practice relative to those is quite different, and so are the record-keeping expectations. The prior rule didn't make that distinction. It caused some friction. It announces a clear delegation rule, explaining how veterinarians interact with non-veterinarians in the care of their veterinary patients. Sets a similarly clear rule on alternative therapies. And it contains a section facilitating veterinarian participation in rabies clinics. In the past, veterinarians had been reluctant to participate in rabies clinics, sometimes because they weren't sure whether record-keeping requirements applicable to their clinical practices would be required of them in those clinics. This rule is meant to clarify for them and encourage them that they are safe participating in those clinics. We think it's certainly within the public interest that we have veterinarians doing clinics whenever they can. We want them to be comfortable doing it. As far as the substantial debates that were raised in public comment and commentary before and after, which is summarized in the responsiveness statement, the kind of hot topics were continuing education. The liberalization of continuing education was not universally beloved. Some people thought it was a great idea. Others were concerned that it reduced rigor. There was a lot of discussion about that, and the board did decide, although not universally, or not unanimously, the board was generally of the opinion that less is more in this area, and that it would go with a more liberal continuing education policy that you see. Second, there was a significant controversy around telemedicine and the veterinarian client-patient relationship. Specifically, and this mirrors a debate that's had in human medicine post-pandemic, the question is whether somebody ought to be able to form a provider-patient relationship via telemedicine. The board sense was yes, and the reasons for that first are that it favors openness and competition. And second, it's where human medicine is going. One can establish a provider-patient relationship via telemedicine now. And the recently convened telemedicine task force, which included a veterinarian among many other providers, tackled that issue and came to the same conclusion that it ought to be possible to form a relationship in appropriate circumstances. And then there was a little bit of talk about delegation and integration of other care providers. People falling on both sides of the debate, some feeling that the rules were too strict and might prevent somebody referring to a non-veterinarian, others feeling that they were too liberal and might allow non-veterinarians to do things they shouldn't. We think we've struck a nice kind of Goldilocks balance in the middle by announcing a clear principle that folks can follow. So that's what we have for you. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Questions for the witness? Senator Bray.
Hearing no questions, I would move approval of the rule. We also have a letter dated April 6th noting a couple of changes. So should the motion be move approval of Rule 21P30 as further amended by the letter from the Secretary of State's office dated April 6th.
Nice.
Would council share with us
Stamp of
the,
approval.
pardon?
That was a great motion.
The name with those technical changes in the April 6th letter? Or?
Yes, so the letter that you received from Gabriel Gilman yesterday makes one technical typographic change. Instead of the word maybe, all one word used, may space be used. And then in working with Legislative Counsel, Ameren Aberjali, who is available if you have questions for her, she was working with LPR and Gabriel Gilman to just make a clarification on which rules you do not need to follow if you are participating in one of those rabies vaccination clinics that Mr. Gilman spoke to. And I think both Gabriel Gilman and Ameren would agree that this is just a clarifying language tweak.
We do, and I apologize for omitting those from my presentation.
You are not alone in such minor forgetfulness. So we have a motion to approve the rule with the amendments just described, technical in nature. Is there any discussion? If not,
I'm only seeing Ameren popping up on the screen. I didn't know whether she wanted to contribute to the conversation. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have the latest version of the agenda in front of me, so I don't know who the official listed is.
there's no one else on the agenda, but if there's someone who should have been on the agenda, we are Charlene?
There's no one else.
Thank you.
Okay. And Charlene says we have no one else on the agenda on this. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay, and the rule has been approved. Which brings us to the State Board of Education Independent Schools rule. And we understand that there's a request to postpone action on this rule.
So
Council.
LCAR, in discussions with Legislative Counsel and the chairs of House Education and Senate Education, is looking to postpone this rule. It's been removed from the agenda. The action item that you still have is the 8-month adoption window for this rule expired on March 16th. So that's the amount of time that the adopting agency here, the State Board of Education, had to adopt the rule. They cannot now adopt the rule unless LCAR grants an extension on that 8-month window. You received an extension request from the chair of the State Board of Education on April 1, 2022. I think everyone should have a hard copy, and Charlene had mailed it out to you. They did not, in that request for an extension, specify a date that they would like an extension until. I would merely point out to the committee that your 45-day review period is not up until April 30th. So if you do not want to tie your hands on that 45-day window, I would suggest giving the State Board of Education until then and a few days after, so that they would be able to adopt the rule.
So a few days after would be.
I'm not,
Yeah.
I think April 28th is a Thursday, so I think you would want to give them at least until the following Monday. So May 2nd?
Yes.
May 2nd. I would say May 2nd is a good date to start with. And if circumstances make it so that they need longer, you could address it in a subsequent extension request.
A motion? Senator Swirl.
Yeah, I move to extend the State Board of Education's deadline to adopt 21P23 independent school program approval until May 2nd.
Okay, motion's been made. Any discussions?
Just a quick question of Jen Samuelson, whether that will be enough time.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for asking. I think it will be. I think, we were ready to go this morning. So I think the request really came from Ledge Council. And my understanding is that various members of the committee wanted more time to review the rules. So, I mean, not to kick it back to you guys, but I think, we would be ready to present whenever we're ready to be received. And Emily, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Trevor's
you.
motion makes sense. Representative Squirrel's motion makes sense.
Motion's been made, postponed until May 2nd. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, say nay. And the deadline has been postponed. And a break.
Thank
So follow-up question, when are we rescheduling them to present?
April 21st, which is your next meeting. You don't have any rules scheduled for.
Charlene, is there anything that you wish to remind us of before we have a motion to adjourn?
Next week. Next meeting is.
Council?
So at your last meeting, you had a question about where the penalties that are collected from the Cannabis Control Board would go. And on behalf of Michelle, I am following up to say that under 7 BSA Section 845, they go to the Cannabis Regulation Fund. And to the question about whether or not that could be used for a fun holiday party, monies from the Cannabis Regulation Fund shall only be appropriated for the purposes of implementation, administration, and enforcement of Chapter 31 of Title 7 and Chapter 33 of Title 7, which are the cannabis regulation chapters. So that is where the penalty money would go and the purposes it could be used for.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
Seeing none, Mr. Chair, I'll move that we adjourn.
Senator Benning has moved it to adjourn. Say aye. Oh, say nay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.